Okay, I call this Board of Adjustment meeting for April 18th in session. Roll call. Whoops, sorry. Board Member Browning,
Here.
Board Member Jenna,
Present.
Board Member Johnson,
Here.
Board Member Madrid.
Present.
Okay, everybody's here. We are going to now rise to do the Pledge of Allegiance, please.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to set up the nominations right now for the chair of the board. I'm calling for nominations, only nominations right now.
I'd like to nominate myself
Okay.
as president or chairman.
Okay, any other nominations? Okay, we'll close the nominations. All those in favor of Mike Madrid as the chair for for Board of Adjustment, please signify on the board, yes or no. All in favor? 4-0. The motion carries. Mike Madrid is our new chair. And now I will take nominations for I will entertain motions for the vice chair. Any nominations?
I'd like to nominate myself.
Okay. Any other nominations? Okay, I'll close the nominations. Please signify with your vote, yes or no. All in favor? Board Member Jenna is our new vice chair. Okay, and I'll let you carry on.
Thank you very much. Next thing on our agenda for tonight is the approval of the agenda. Can I have a motion for an approval of our agenda?
So moved.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Do we vote with the board, or can we just do a voice vote?
You can just do a voice vote on this one.
All those in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. We'll continue with the agenda tonight for the minutes of the March 21st, 2019 meeting minutes. Can I have a motion or discussion on this?
Move that we accept the minutes as it is.
Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion for approval of the minutes for March 21st, 2019, and a second. All those in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Aye. The motion passes. We will move on to our public comment section of tonight's hearing. This is a portion of the meeting tonight where we welcome anyone from the public who would like to speak on anything that is not on tonight's agenda. So any items that aren't on the agenda, this is now the time to come forward. Seeing none, we'll move forward to...
Yes, her name is on the list. That's the list for
Oh,
public
this was the list
comment.
for the prior
public
to the...
comment.
Oh, got it. Not for the case.
Not for the case, for public comment.
Wonderful. Sorry about that. So we'll stay on the public comment portion of this meeting, and can't really read the name. Pam Chadbourne. If Pam Chadbourne can come down. I apologize for that.
Thanks. My name is Pam Chadbourne. I live a block and a half from here in District 1. I'm going to make a few comments about process. I come to a lot of meetings and have for 3 years, City Council, Planning Commission, Historical Preservation Board, and others, so hope these sound okay to you. When motions and seconds are made, I would appreciate the chair stating so-and-so moved and so-and-so seconded. I have heard the administrative support for the meetings request this. It is a good practice for the chair to recognize who made the motion and who made the second, and to say it verbally for the audio record. So I would like to request that you make that a practice. I think that other boards and commissions strive and don't always get there. I'm going to make the same request to them, so it's nothing personal. Also, when there's a voice vote, I'd really appreciate it if you say any nays to give a chance for people to say nay. So even though if you say all in favor say aye and there's all ayes, still say, are there nays? And make sure that there's a verbal record of nothing happening. I would really appreciate that. The conduct of the meetings is really valuable and important. So I thank you for doing that. It's not easy either. I recognize when you're doing it, it is difficult to do. And also to keep track of everything's going on, but we always have an attorney here to help us out with that. And lots of times people help each other on the boards and commissions. It's a great thing to do this well. So thank you very much for your service and for thinking about these suggestions. Let's see, I'm going to make a point about public comment is that we are allowed to comment on things that are on the agenda, just not things that are on the public hearing. But if it has been published and we would like to make a point about it, then everyone has already been noticed and people have a right to be here and are able, who can be here, will be here to hear about it. So we actually should speak about items that are on the agenda except for public hearings. And those words have been put on other agendas. I hope they get put on this one.
They will.
It's really important to be able to do that. Finally, really I'm here to thank you for denying the 5609 Curtis Street parking reduction. And I noticed that, a couple of people who are here, they're making that vote, aren't here tonight, and a couple of people who weren't there last month are here. But some of you were at both, and thank you all anyway for voting against that parking reduction. I live in a block from half from here. I know that my neighbors all along Curtis, all along Nevada, have trouble parking, and it impacts their lives. Thank you so much for recognizing that and not waiving parking, especially for a slot infill, which doesn't belong in downtown Littleton. Thank you.
Thank you for those comments. Seeing no other names on the list for public comment, we'll move forward to general.
Me?
Yes.
You need to ask if
Do I
there's
need to-
anybody else who wants to speak, even though they're not on the
Okay.
sign-up list.
So
Thank you.
if there's a thank you. If there's anyone else here tonight who would like to partake in the public comment section of tonight's hearing. Okay, seeing none, we will move forward onto general business. Do we have any general business items ready to go?
We do not.
No. All right, thank you so much. So now we'll move forward into our public hearing. And our public hearing tonight is a BOA case. I don't have the case number here. But we have a variance request tonight, a variance reducing the side setback from 10 feet to 5 feet at 6626 South Elmwood Street. And we'll see if we have any public comment here. But we'll first hear from our city staff and get a presentation from them. We will then hear from our applicant as well as our applicant here tonight. Wonderful. And then we'll be taking comments after from the public on this case. So if staff is ready, take it away.
Good evening, Board of Adjustment. I am Carl Onsager, planner with the City of Littleton and presenting on behalf thereof. For Resolution 03-2019, for a variance at 6626 South Elmwood Street for a reduction of the south setback to 5 feet to build an attached garage to accommodate a qualified disability. So this is not necessarily under our normal variance for hardship, but for reasonable accommodation. So tonight I will go over the application details with review, criteria, and analysis, staff's recommendation, and then followed up by board action. So the property is located at 6626 South Elmwood Street, and the applicant is requesting a reduction of that setback on the south side of the property. On your screen is a diagram provided by the applicant showing the existing carport and where that new garage would be located. It will also remove the shed that is also in that side setback. And not included in the staff report, but included in tonight's presentation is also a diagram of the interior of that garage, showing a 5-foot wide ramp extending from the house that extends along the north side of that garage, which is one of the reasons for the 19-foot wide attached garage. So based on this, it looks like there's still only 2 cars kind of that are allowed or to accommodate, especially for those accessibility considerations. So again, like I said, the review criteria are different. Whereas with a hardship, the applicant has to meet all 5 criteria. In this, it's to demonstrate reasonable accommodation. And so the board may consider any number of these, including but not limited to, but it doesn't mean that the threshold is to meet all of them. So upon review, the multiple sclerosis, or MS, as I will be pronouncing much better from now on, is an autoimmune disease. The extension of the garage would be to accommodate wheelchairs if they become necessary to accommodate this diagnosis. And the enclosed attached garage, rather than the carport that they have right now, would allow safer access to the vehicle in all sorts of weather conditions, along with just better ramp access. The second is whether there's an alternative which is better or equally serves the needs of the individual. Upon review, the primary structure and lot configuration do not appear to alter or offer an alternative design for that garage that would accommodate the needs interior to the garage while also being located in a different place. The third consideration the board may use is whether the requested variance reasonably relates to the individual's ability to use and enjoy a dwelling. And if they are unable to accommodate the ramp and the additional accessibility considerations, then this dwelling may not, be able a reasonable use given the diagnosis. The negative impacts or hardships placed on the adjoining properties or property owners should the individual's request be granted. So the southern property is located 13 feet from that north property line as it relates to the other. So the reduction in side setback would still allow for an 18 feet difference in structures. And so if the buildings were built to their normal required setbacks, that would only be 15 feet. So and the adjoining property owner also submitted a signature saying that they had no problem with this variance. And the board may also consider whether there's any hardship placed on the city or adverse impacts that would result in undermining the legitimate goals of the city's zoning ordinance. So one of the reasons to have, spacing is for air and light. Given the additional spacing between those structures, it doesn't seem like this would undermine that intent of that zoning ordinance for the setbacks. And additionally, a detached garage does have a side setback of only 5 feet. So again, this doesn't seem that it would undermine the intent of that zoning ordinance. We did receive a question today from board member Gina, and those two questions, one was, does the fire department or police department have any concern regarding the access to said structure or adjacent structures? So generally the review by fire and police is done at the time of building permit and is not generally, these aren't referred out generally as a practice during the variance process. With that said, I do not anticipate any kind of concern, just given the fact that on the north side, there is also a 5-foot setback on the north side setback. So a reduction to 5 doesn't seem like it would undermine that health and safety consideration. But again, would be fully reviewed and referred at the time of building permit. The other is what future restrictions may be imposed on the adjacent property owners. And I do not believe that a restriction or condition can be placed on an adjacent property, as they are not a party to this variance request. But given the spacing of the houses as they are right now, that adequate spacing seems to be met. So upon which, again, they don't have to meet all of these, but it's staff's opinion that they met all of them regardless. So is that the staff finds the application meets the criteria, and the applicant is here to answer any additional questions. But we recommend approval of BOA Resolution 03-2019. And I would entertain any questions you may have at this time.
Thank you very much. Mr. Onsager?
Onsager, yes.
Onsager? Thank you very much. Does anyone have any questions for staff at this time?
Just,
Chairman Jenna, or Vice Chairman?
just for general information and general education for the board as well as everybody else, what's magic about that 15 feet setback? What's the purpose, or what's the, why are we looking at trying to vary from a 15-foot setback if we don't know what 15 feet means?
So 15 feet is intended as just a baseline for allowing adequate spacing between principal structures, so primary structures and housing, to allow adequate light and airflow. So the other consideration for why the south setback is 10 feet and the north is only 5 feet is the south has better light considerations. So, you know, the 10-foot would allow for more light into that south side, which is in a way kind of negated by the fact that the light is going into a garage structure on this one. So, but that's the intent generally for why there's a greater side setback on the south and east sides is for that light. But the general spacing of buildings is for the airflow and light.
So your determination is that it was not affected?
No, those would not be affected. And even in considerations like downtown, there are no setback lines, but there's a different character and context in downtown.
Okay, why I asked about the adjacent, and it seems like you followed up with the neighbor, so that's a good sign. Why I asked about the adjacent, because somewhere in the future, maybe a new owner that may be, looking at trying to decrease their setback also for whatever reason. And now we're talking about going from, say, as we say, 18 feet or whatever, down to, say, 10 feet. Then would we be looking at trying to look at a variance for that in the future?
So the north could potentially reduce that down to their north side setback of only 5 feet. However, in this case, at the time, this certainly meets the most pressing need of for the qualified disability. I think it meets that need first, and then the next is a hypothetical. And given that there's other parts of the city that have 0 side setback requirements, 10 feet, I believe, would still be adequate, were that to become the case.
Thank you.
I have a question.
Yes.
In here in the application request, it states that this thing is to be a 19-foot wide by 45-foot long 4-car attached garage. Is it really going to hold 4 cars, or is that just for measurement purposes?
So I believe that was for measurement purposes and also written before we had seen the interior diagram, which we had subsequently asked the applicant to provide. They did. And so, the proposed, and I can go back to that diagram, the proposed spacing appears to be only for 2 cars on that interior. And with the ramp, that also kind of adds additional constraints it down to only 2 cars. So,
Okay.
but absent that, it would have been similar to a potential 4-car garage.
So 29 by 45 would have been sufficient then, basically.
Yep.
Quick question for staff. Are there any in-between structures, setbacks in this zone district that would affect the property to the south?
So there are the accessory structure or detached structure setback would be only 5 feet. But no other accessory structures would be allowed in between those two.
No, well, I think my question was more along the lines, is there a setback distance from a structure on an adjoining or an adjacent property? Are there any requirements like that?
There is not.
There's not. Okay. Just real quickly, this board is used to dealing with the variances that are under scrutiny of state statute, and we have to find hardship or practical difficulty in order to approve this. Could you explain to the board how this request differs than a normal variance request, and what, I know we went through it in the analysis, but what specifically should the board be looking for that differs normally from a typical variance request?
Sorry, that was posed to me.
Yeah, probably it would be best answered. So the difference between this and formal variance request. Let's see. Oh, thank you. Thanks, Chairman Madrid and members of the Board of Adjustment. My name is Mike Sutherland. I'm the Deputy Director of Community Development. Yes, this is a little bit of a different request. So typically, when you consider a variance request, you're looking for a non-monetary hardship as one of the key elements of a variance request. And that hardship cannot be self-imposed. There is a separate section of the code for variances associated with disabilities. And for that section of the code, the requirements do not relate to a non-self-imposed hardship, such as a triangular lot or something like that. Again, as Mr. Onsager had mentioned during his presentation, I believe the criteria for a disability are that one or more are met, rather than all of the criteria for a variance not associated with a disability. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you very much for that clarification.
Thank you.
I think I could add that under the Americans with Disabilities Act, for public accommodation, which this isn't necessarily a public accommodation, but a public accommodation in that the city allows for these kinds of variances under a person who has a disability who needs to have some changes, and that's what the Board of Adjustment is for.
Great, thank you very much. Does, yes, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. One quick question for staff. I noticed on the proposed drawing there's an indication that there's a shed apparently in the backyard that would be moved, and I apologize if you've already mentioned this in your presentation, but is that part of this proposal, or is that a separate action for that shed being moved?
So the shed being removed would not be part of a variance request. I will note that the shed is currently non-conforming, and so this would actually clean up a non-conformity.
Thank you very much.
Does the board, yes?
You mentioned in your earlier discussion with regard to setbacks that the other parts of Littleton have zero setback requirements.
That is correct.
Then is there a standard, or is there, is kind of a hodgepodge of today it's going to be zero over here and tomorrow it's going to be 15, or what? What's the criteria for the setback? Again, I asked that same question earlier.
Certainly, Board Member Jenham. So the setbacks vary between different districts, of course. This is a single-family oriented district where you have a wider setback between two buildings. When you get into the central area, it's expected to have a greater density. This density is expected to be about 4 units per acre or less. So you've got a little bit more space around each building. When you get into zoning districts that allow greater densities, let's say 8 to 12 units per acre, you get less space between the adjacent structures. And in some cases, such as the central area district, that goes down to 0. Multifamily districts are, again, a little bit different. They anticipate some space between the buildings of multifamily structures. But that's part of the reason why you've got setback in this district of 5 feet on one side, 10 feet on the other. The intent was to have 15 feet of separation between buildings in this area to give it a somewhat uniform look.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any more questions for staff from the board? No? All right. We do have our applicants here tonight. We can move forward if the applicants would have anything to present or to add to tonight's hearing. This would be that time. If you could just please state your name and
Thank you,
address.
Chairman Madrid and board members. My name's Dan Morrison, my wife Julie Morrison. And I think we've covered most things. If you have any questions directly for me, I'd be glad to answer them for you.
Okay. Do we have any questions from the board for our applicant tonight?
With respect to our guest who is here, it does help the parking situation.
I do have one question
Yes, sir.
for our applicant. In looking at the layout of the garage that we've been given today, are we looking at the most, the least amount of variance that we would need in order to accommodate this request?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so the width and everything has been measured, the ramp, everything, it's all going to fit?
Yeah, in my discussions with an engineer and an architect, the 19 feet is pretty much the minimum to make it work.
Okay. Thank you
I'd
very
love
much.
to get to 20, but
All right. Does the board have any other questions for our applicant tonight? Seeing none? All right, thank you very much. We have the list for our public hearing, public speaking list, and I don't have any names on it for this case. Is there anyone in our
Chair
audience?
Madrid,
Yes.
you need to open the public hearing first.
Okay.
And give the time, and then ask for any citizen comments.
So we have to open public
Open the
comments.
public hearing, just say, I open the public hearing at 7 PM,
Oh, okay. Great.
and then you'll have to close it when everybody's talked.
Do we need a motion to close it?
No.
No. Wonderful. So I will be opening up public comment on this case at 7:00 p.m. If anyone in our audience would like to come up and speak, yes, please.
My name is Pam Chadbourne. I live a block and a half from here still. A couple of comments about zoning districts and why the spacing is the way it is. I grew up in these kind of suburban neighborhoods. I think many people did. And part of the intent, while the difference in the 5 and 10 feet might be light and air, is clearly to have a backyard that's fenced for your dog or your whatever, and your garden, and to maybe nowadays put in solar arrays, and just to have enjoyment of that space. So light and air is part of it, and I also think it's just distance from other people. That matters. It has good fences make good neighbors is a hundreds of years old phrase, and so there's many other reasons for the setbacks. A zero setback is bad. I live down here. We're doing a comp plan revision, and we're not really addressing the really important issues. And I appreciate your comments, Board Member Jenna. This is, setbacks are really important, and the more dense you are, arguably, the more important setbacks become in distance from your neighbor, at least in terms of noise and space and interference and room to live your life, from their smoke, from any other things that they do that might irritate you, or vice versa. So the spacing between parcels is really important. It's just because in other areas it's zero does not mean it should be in this area. There's lots of reasons for that spacing, and I really appreciate your awareness of it. I also appreciate your consideration of the future. I think the future property owner's ability to build on their property is somewhat limited by this, and I think that should be mentioned in some way, even if they agree now. Arguably, their sales price could be impacted and things like that. I don't know if that plays into your decision. That's not mine to bring up or to decide, but I wanted to mention it because those kind of things, the impact over time and other people's uses, needs to be considered even if it's not part of the decision now. And again, I've listened to a lot of meetings and I hear a lot of decisions saying, oh, quick and dirty, here's this now and it looks okay. Really, there's many other considerations. You must decide for the city and the future, 40, 60 years, not right now, not just right now. So I'm not sure how, that affects this at all. I'm sympathetic. My friend who grew up 2 blocks from here has MS. So, and she's far more advanced, so I'm very sympathetic to the need for this. So thank you just for listening to my thoughts, and thank you for your thoughts about this, thinking of the future and the impact on the neighbors of this change. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do we have anyone else who would like to come down and share their comments on this case? Okay, seeing none, I will close the public comment for this case at 7:04 p.m. At this time, with public comment closed, I would invite any board members to share their comments on this case or to make a motion on this case. If you'd like to have a discussion, just to get everyone's ideas out there, we can do that. Or if we feel comfortable making a motion in a second, then we would take a vote at that time. So I will open it up to the board. If any of the members would have any comments at this time.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
I want to thank staff for a good presentation, for the thorough analysis, and I also want to thank the applicants for going through the process and doing your diligence as well. It seems like with the staff recommendation, it really points towards the spirit and intent of reasonable accommodation, which I'm very comfortable with. I appreciate the questions from my fellow board members, and if the chair is ready, I can make a motion, but there might be other discussion as well.
Thank you, Board Member Browning. Does anyone else have any comments?
Johnson, nothing else.
No, okay. I would like to just throw in my comments on this one, and I do have one more question for staff, if I could. if this garage that were being proposed were a detached structure from the house, you said it would have a 5-foot side setback to the south?
Correct.
And so this would be double that requirement if it happened to have been detached from the primary structure?
Correct.
Yep, okay. I just want to double check on that. Great. That was all I had on this one. If anyone would like to make a motion on this case, I think the board would be ready.
Sure, I move to approve staff recommendation.
We have a motion from Board Member Browning. Do I have a second?
Johnson, second.
I have a second from Board Member Johnson. So the motion for approval has been seconded, and at this time, can I call for a vote? At this time, can I call for a vote? Okay, great. So if everyone can just vote.
The vote is 4 in favor. The motion carries unanimously.
Great. Thank you very much. Your case has been approved, and thank you for coming down here tonight. Just get back to my agenda here. So moving on to comments and reports, that would be from our Community Development Director and our staff. Mr. Sutherland, would you have anything for us tonight?
Thank you, Chairman Madrid. Yes, we do have a meeting scheduled for May 16th for the Board of Adjustment. And we have a couple of items on that agenda, two sign variance requests. And then afterward, we're planning on a study session to go over procedural training and legal training for the Board of Adjustment. And that was all I had to report tonight.
Wonderful, thank you so much. We'll move on to any reports from staff.
Mr. Sutherland covered everything. Thank you.
Wonderful. Sounds good. We can move on to any reports by any of the board members or myself. I don't have anything at this time. Anyone have anything? Nope. Seeing none, I guess the last thing on our agenda would be to move for adjournment.
You don't need to move for adjournment. You can just adjourn.
Oh, even better. I'll just adjourn this case, or this hearing tonight. Thank you so much.